Hello everyone, a very good evening. Welcome to Shri Primetime News. I'm Surusi Gunasekara. Let's look at the headlines first.
Terrorism is threatening, President says at Nepal. UN against Bodubala Sena. Modi and President meet once again.
President Mahinda Rajapaksa Wednesday called for a common voice among South Asian nations on international issues and cooperation eradicating terrorism regionally and globally.
We gather here with renewed focus, desiring gather integration for peace and prosperity. SAARC has been evolving for almost 3 decades, which is at a crucial juncture. There is a need to shift from traditional approaches and implement a result-oriented action that impact directly on the people, he said while addressing the 18th summit of the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation in Kathmandu, Nepal.
By monitoring crisis outreach, I wish to conclude a cordial appreciation to the former Secretary General and the incumbent government for their contributions. It is indeed an honor to be associated with my new colleagues who are attending the summit of our for the first time. I look forward to our continued engagement.
President Mahinda Rajapaksa on Wednesday held a bilateral meeting with the Prime Minister Narendra Modi, Kathmandu in Nepal,
during which Modi thanked the presidents for pardoning and sending back the Indian fishermen who were sentenced to death for alleged drug trafficking. The meeting, which lasted for nearly 30 minutes, the two leaders discussed important bilateral and regional issues. This is the third meeting between the two leaders since Modi took over as Prime Minister in May. Modi during his address also wished good luck to Rajapaksa for the January polls in Sri Lanka. Rajapaksa attended Modi's swearing in, after which they held a bilateral meeting. Later, the two met on sidelines of the UN General Assembly in New York in September. Asked if Modi thanked him for the release of fishermen, Rajapaksa said that, "I said we must thank Modi for his foreign policy. It happened due to that," The Hindu reported. The relationship between India and Sri Lanka is very good, President Rajapaksa said. 5 Indian fishermen sentenced to death in Sri Lanka for alleged drug trafficking were released last week after President Rajapaksa pardoned them. The fishermen were apprehended in November 2011 and sentenced to death by the Colombo High Court on October 13th for alleged drug trafficking. The Sri Lankan president commuted the death sentence after Prime Minister Modi had a telephonic conversation with him on the issue. The Sri Lankan leader also welcomed Modi's initiative to develop and launch a satellite dedicated to SAARC.
The UN Special Rapporteur on Minority Issues, Rita Isaac, has accused the Bodubala Sena of igniting tension and contributing to more than 350 violent attacks against Muslims, over 150 attacks against Christians in the past 2 years.
According to the report submitted by Ms. Rita Isaac to the UN, the Bodubala Sena, along with the groups, are promoting extremist views, proclaiming the racial superiority of Sinhala Buddhists and spreading fear among the population by saying, for example, alleging their statues of Buddha are being bulldozed by religious minorities, or that evangelical Christians are forcibly converting vulnerable people. Ms. Rita Isaac noted that she, along with other United Nations experts, called on Sri Lanka to adopt urgent measures to stop the racial and faith-based hatred and violence directed by Muslims and Christian communities by Buddhist groups with extremist views, and to bring culprits to justice. The UN Special Rapporteurs also recalled that in Sri Lanka, the United Nations Development and Humanitarian branches were unable to fully address the United Nations political and human rights priorities.
Head of non-government organizations holds secret discussion with United Nations Human Rights Commissioner Said Rad Al Hussein at Geneva in Switzerland.
Addressing media briefing in Colombo, General Secretary went on to say left front parties failed to appoint a presidential candidate. Frontline Socialist Party and Navasama Samaja Party hold various discussions in this regard, but we are unable to nominate a candidate. Finally, I decided to contest in the presidential election, Siritunga Jayasuriya said. Earlier, Siritunga Jayasuriya contested in the 2005 presidential election.
Views are expressed in Parliament on Wednesday on the debate on the impending presidential election. Chief Opposition Whip MP John Amaratunga expressed these views.
Preparations are being made for the Pope's visit to Sri Lanka. The Catholic people are waiting with much anticipation to see the Pope. I make a request, I beg, that the presidential election not be held in January and that is being pushed back to another date.
Prime Minister D.M. Jayaratne shared these views against Minister John Amaratunga.
We are now in a competitive situation. We will renew ourselves, hold the election, and the Pope will meet a new president, not the old president. And the first world leader that the new president will meet will be the Pope, one of the greatest leaders in the world.
Speaking at an event held on Wednesday, Common Opposition candidate Maithripala Sirisena expressed the following views.
The government is attempting to ingrain in the minds of the SLFP supporters the idea that I am trying to form a UNP government and that I will leave thereafter. For now, I can tell you that it will be a government comprising all political parties represented in Parliament. We invite all political parties represented in Parliament to join with us. On the other hand, we can call this a national government. The tenure of this government will be 100 days. The primary function in these 100 days will be the removal of the executive powers of the presidency. Thereafter, we hope to give the people the opportunity to elect a government of their liking. But as the common candidate, as a man who will be competing against a person like Mahinda Rajapaksa, it is clear to the people, and I wish to say to them that my safety is in the people's hands. The problem faced by the UNP supporters is that you do not have a government of your own. The problem faced by the SLFP supporters is that they have formed a government and the SLFP is not in it. They are attempting to sweep aside all political parties and that embark on a dictatorial journey with a system where there are no political parties. I do not think that any political party in this country should allow that to happen.
Party that reaped the most benefits from Maithripala Sirisena's victory.
Speaking at event in Anuradhapura, the President Rajapaksa expressed the following views.
We are
not vengeful people. We do not wish to exact vengeance from anyone. Chandrika had reduced the SLFP to 57 seats when she handed it over to me. I raised that number to 127 and now I have come before you. Today we have 160 seats in Parliament. Several people must leave and my door is the same today. I said in the past that it was like a saloon door and that people could come and go. So these people come and go. This is not something that happened to me alone. What did CP De Silva do back then? Even that was in Minneriya. It was in the Polonnaruwa district in 1964.
ඒත් මින්නේදී ඒත් පොළොන්නරුව දිස්ත්‍රික්කේ 64. ඒ විතරක් නෙවෙයි. එකපාරක් මැතිනියට කොකා පෙන්නුවා. යන ගමන්
While he was going, one of the people from our side, Charlie Ediri Surya, had milk rice with madam and then went over. In my case, he had hoppers with me and then went.
කාලා ඇවිල්ලා කිරිබත් කාලා ඇවිල්ලා මගේ නම් ආප්ප කාලා ගිහිල්ලා. චන්ද්‍රිකා මොකද කරේ?
What did Chandrika do? Even she left madam. She went and formed her own party.
පක්ෂයක් ඇදුවා චන්ද්‍රික. බෞද්ධ ජන නිදහස් පෙරමුණ. මාර පෙරමුණ. පක්ෂේ දාලා මේ මහින්ද රාජපක්ෂ
Mahinda Rajapaksa did not leave the party. It is wrong for those who are in glass houses to throw stones. People have always come and gone. Those who went have never fared well, but those who have come had definitely fared better. But I will say one thing clearly. I have files on all the actions of those who left, but I will not use them. I am not a person who would use them.
පොත ගැන හොඳට මගේ ගාව ෆයිල් තියෙනවා. ඉතින් මම ඒවා පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ නැහැ. ඒවා පාවිච්චි කරන්න මිනිහෙක් නෙවෙයි මම.
Opposition leader Ranil Wickremesinghe and the common opposition candidate Maithripala Sirisena met for a second time at Sirikota today.
These two leaders have agreed to abolish executive presidency within 100 days time period. Opposition leader Ranil Wickremesinghe and the common opposition candidate Maithripala Sirisena will sign agreement on 28th of November. Political organizations and 3 civil organizations will take part in this event. These two leaders will release their election propaganda on the same day.
Leading British lawmaker urged the European Union on Thursday to remove preferential trade traffic from Sri Lanka if it is failed to address human rights concerns.
Sri Lanka has refused to cooperate with the United Nations Human Rights Council investigation into war crimes allegedly committed by both state forces and separatist Tamil rebels during a conflict that ended in 2009 despite mounting international pressures. The United Nations has estimated about 40,000 civilians were killed in the final weeks of the 26-year conflict, mostly by the army, but Sri Lankan President Mahinda Rajapaksa has dismissed the probe as politically motivated. The European Union is Sri Lanka's largest export destination, accounting for 36% of Sri Lanka's total exports, according to the European Union figures. Our government must negotiate with European Union partners to remove trade concessions from Sri Lanka if the government of Sri Lanka continues to deny the UN investigating team access into the country. Richard Ottaway, a conservative lawmaker and chairman of the Parliament Foreign Affairs Committee, said in a statement accompanying a report on the government's work on human rights. While the European Union has temporarily withdrawn some trade concessions, Sri Lanka remains a beneficiary of the generalized schemes of preference, always developing country exports to pay less or no duties on their export to the Europe. During a summit of Commonwealth nations in Colombo a year ago, British Prime Minister David Cameron was a vocal critic of Sri Lanka's human rights records, and Britain was among those who pushed for the international inquiry. The government should be ready to consider all possible options, including sanctions, to convince Sri Lanka to allow access, the British lawmakers said in the report.
Sri Lanka may consider releasing the Indian boats in its custody soon after verifying details of ownership, BJP leader Subramanian Swamy said on Wednesday.
I have given a list of the board numbers and their owners to the Defence Secretary, explaining that many of them belongs to poor fishermen and not rich traveller owners, he said after a meeting with Gotabaya Rajapaksa, Defence Secretary and brother of the President Mahinda Rajapaksa. They will verify if the names listed are of the actual owners. If that is true, they will be inclined to release the boats, Dr. Swami said. Over the last year, Sri Lanka followed the policy of releasing Indian fishermen arrested by its navy for alleged poaching early by returning their traveller to deter them from the practice. Over 18 Indian travellers are in Sri Lankan custody now. A group of fishermen met him recently with a list of some of those travellers owned by them, Dr. Swami said. The BJP leader was in Colombo to deliver the Lalit Atulumudali Memorial Lecture on SARC reforms and globalization. Dr. Swami said he discussed the issues on terrorism with the Sri Lankan Defence Secretary as India and Sri Lanka faced the same problem. We discussed how to ensure communal harmony and at the same time curb Islamic terrorism, he said. Dr. Swami says he also sought the Mr. Rajapaksa's perspective on the Chinese submarines that recently docked in Colombo port, causing serious concern to India.
Siritunga Jayasuriya, General Secretary of the United Socialist Party, decided to contest in the presidential election.
At the meeting, NGO head and UNHRC commissioner hold brief discussion on war crimes, allegations, reports which is scheduled to submit against Sri Lanka at the UNHRC session on March. Global Tamil Forum says the investigation clearly proved the war crimes committed by the Sri Lankan government. Former Norwegian Minister Erik Solheim, Channel 4 journalist Callum McRae and several others have made falsely testified before the investigation panel. However, newspaper failed to release further detail about name of NGO head.
Another phase of the Kala Survey program initiated according to a concept of Member of Parliament Arthuminda Silva for a benefit of artists rendered helpless was implemented last Saturday. Police media spokesman SSP Ajit Rohana said investigators are scrutinizing fingerprints of 74 persons in connection with the breaking of door lockers of the clay artifacts room of the Colombo National Museum. A wild elephant entered the scared city of Anuradhapura this morning and trampled to death 2 persons in the neighborhood of the scared boar tree. Cooperative and Internal Trade Minister has decided to buy local big onions at a 19 rupees certified price. Minister in charge of the subject, Johnston Fernando, said that the purchase of big onions in CWE lorries will begin from Dambulla from 12 noon yesterday.
Australia Test batsman Phil Hughes has died 2 days after being hit on the head by a ball.
Australia Test batsman Phil Hughes has died, officials say, 2 days after being hit on the head by a ball. Cricket Australia officials said he never regained consciousness and died in hospital in Sydney. Hughes, 25, was carried off on a stretcher at the Sydney Cricket Ground after a short-pitched delivery struck his head, missing his helmet. He had CPR and mouth-to-mouth resuscitation before being taken to hospital and placed in an induced coma. A statement from a Cricket Australia spokesman said, "It is my sad duty to inform you that a short time ago Philip Hughes passed away. He never regained consciousness following his injury on Tuesday. He was..."
The price of oil has fallen as OPEC oil producers prepare for their meeting on Tuesday, and data showed crude stock rose last week.
Inventories of commercial U.S. crude oil increased by 1.9 million barrels from the previous week, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. Brent crude futures price slid 0.8% to $77.67 a barrel after the data. The drop came as Saudi Arabia indicated it would not push for output cuts to help push up oil prices. The oil market will stabilize itself eventually, said Saudi Oil Minister Ali Al-Naimi. Saudi Arabia is the largest producer of the 12 members of the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. The oil cartel is split over how to react to the sharp slump in oil prices.
Sri Lanka vs England, the first ODI match began at the R. Premadasa Stadium yesterday.
Big wicket, a big one. A six the previous ball and a soft dismissal, just a push back. And thank you very much, says Jeevan Mendis. Ravi Bopara is going to be the key here. He's the experienced batsman as far as England is concerned. And of course, bat quite deep. There's Vokes. They do have the batting muscle here. It's off the mark. Looking for two here. Tiriman is the fieldsman and does well to keep it down to. Batted it around. Oh, good work by Sangakkara. Great anticipation. And he got across quickly. Would have been a brilliant catch to almost leg slip. What does Dilshan do there? That was Mahela Jayawardene looking to stop them, but Dilshan looking through some.
That's all from Sri News Desk today. Have a pleasant evening. Good night.